Most of you know I really enjoy working on old cars. And most of you know I own a 1935 Ford convertible. I was at a antique automobile car club meeting, and I learned something about my car that I did not know. That my 1935 Ford convertible sedan was used as a pace car in the 1935 Indianapolis 500. In addition to that, Amelia Earhart was the grand marshal of the race. I have pictures of her sitting in my car at the Indianapolis 500. Well, to be honest, I haven't yet been able to confirm it was my car that she was sitting in. But there were only about 4,500 of these cars built. And I bought mine from a guy in Indiana. I was fascinated by the thought that Amelia Earhart might have actually sat in my car. So I've done some research to learn more about this extraordinary woman. Amelia was born in 1897 in Kansas. And when she was growing up, she was looked at as a tomboy that defied all that girly stuff, that girly behavior. She would climb trees. She hunted rats with a 22-inch rifle. And she would do a body slam on a downhill sled ride. Now, for some of you, let me explain this if you've never been sleigh riding. The objective of sleigh riding is to maximize your speed as you're going down the hill. It really is quite exhilarating. So it works like this. You grab your sled, you hold it in front of you, you run, and then you jump on the sled and dive down. When you dive, you belly slam on your sled, and it is quite effective for getting that extra boost of speed, unless you hit a patch of dirt. In which case, your head goes over the top of the sled, plants in the ground, and your feet come flying over your head. Clearly, Amelia Earhart was courageous. She was also probably one of the very first women to demonstrate the women's ability in this male-dominated world. Amelia actually kept a scrapbook of clippings from newspapers about all the different women, successful women, in this male-oriented fields, in various male-oriented fields. No doubt that scrapbook today would include something about Kamala Harris. That is, if her scrapbook could handle digital media. In 1916, Amelia graduated high school in Chicago. And from there, she went to finishing school in Pennsylvania. Now, she only lasted about a year and a half. She left in the middle of her second year at finishing school. And it doesn't surprise me. There was probably no class at finishing school that taught you how to do a proper body slam. In 1920, Amelia took her first plane ride. And she was hooked. A week later, she took a flying lesson. You know, those flying lessons were $1 a minute back then. In 1922, Amelia saved $2,000 to buy her first plane. It was a two-seat biplane, two-seater, and she painted it yellow, and she called it the Canary. Amelia used this canary to set many flying records, or her first flying record, by flying it at 14,000 feet. That's nearly 3 miles high. In 1928, Amelia was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. Now, although she was a pilot for this particular trip, she was just a passenger. It took 21 hours. And upon returning, she, the pilot, and the co-pilot were treated like celebrities and had a ticker-tape parade in New York City. In 1931, Amelia married George Putnam. George was a publisher and her promoter. Now, she wasn't into marriages, so to keep her independence, Amelia referred to the marriage as a partnership with dual control. Together, they worked on plans for Amelia to be the first female to solo across the Atlantic Ocean. In 1932, 5 years to the date of Lindbergh's flight, Amelia left Newfoundland, heading towards Paris, France. Now, unfortunately, she had mechanical and plane problems, engine problems, and she ended up landing early in a pasture in Ireland. And from what I understand, she actually taxied right up behind some guy's barn. But she was the first woman to solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Amelia continued to set records. She was the first to solo from Hawaii to California. She was the first to solo from Mexico City to Newark, New Jersey. And she was the first female to solo across the continental United States. And she did this all by herself. You see, I originally thought these records were because she was flying so low to the ground. In 1937, prior to her 40th birthday, she wasn't even 40 yet, she took on another challenge that she said would probably be her last. And that was to be the first woman to fly all the way around the world. That's 29,000 miles. In March, she and her co-pilot, Fred Noonan, started from California and they were going to fly west. They made it to Hawaii, but on the second leg of the trip, when they left Hawaii, her twin-engine plane, Electra, crashed while trying to take off. Her plane was pretty badly damaged, but it was repaired. And by June 1st, she and Fred were ready to try it again. This time, however, they were flying from Miami, and they were going to fly Miami, Florida, and they were going to fly east. In 28 days, she continued that journey all the way around the world, and in 28 days, she landed in New Guinea. They had done about 22,000 miles. They only had about 7,000 miles left to go. Their next stop was to fly to a small island called Howland Island. This uninhabited island was only 1.5 miles long and 0.5 mile wide. It was just a speck in the Pacific Ocean. On July 2nd, they left New Guinea. Now, there was a U.S. Coast Guard ship stationed just off the Howland Island. And the objective of that ship was to maintain radio contact with Amelia. Now, the ship and Amelia tried to maintain radio communications, but according to the story, the messages were faint, they were garbled with static, and it was hard for them to understand. The ship could hear Amelia say, one time she said, "We must be on you. We cannot see you. Fuel is running low. Been unable to reach you by radio. We are flying at 1,000 feet. Now, naturally, the ship tried to respond, but it appeared as if Amelia did not hear their message. It was about an hour later. The ship heard another message from Amelia. And she reported, "We are flying we are running north and south. That was the last message they ever heard. What followed was the most extensive sea search in naval history. After 2 weeks of searching over 250,000 square miles of ocean, they reluctantly gave up the search. They had spent $4 million on this search. In 1938, a lighthouse was erected on that tiny island of Howland in Amelia's memory. Now, there are multiple theories of what happened that have surfaced over the years. One theory in particular was based on a photo that appeared to be part of her landing gear. And also they found human remains on another uninhabited island of Nicoaroro. They suggested that Amelia crash landed on this tiny island that's a few hundred miles from Howland Island. Unfortunately, none of this evidence has been absolutely conclusive. The world will remember Amelia for her courage, for her many achievements in both aviation and for women. It's interesting how over 80 years ago, this lady was showing the world how very capable women were at doing tasks typically done by men. In closing, I would like to read part of a letter Amelia wrote to her husband in case she did not return. Please know that I'm quite aware of the hazards. I want to do it because I want to do it. Women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, their failure must be but a challenge to others. Amelia Earhart, you are pretty cool.